What if one of the quietest habits in your life after 60 is silently reshaping your entire body? When sexual intimacy fades with age, it doesn't simply disappear from the calendar. It withdraws from the biology. The human body is a conversation between hormones, nerves, blood vessels, and emotional meaning. And when sex becomes absent, that conversation changes tone. In both men and women, the brain reduces its release of dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals that give us motivation, bonding, and emotional warmth. This shift doesn't just alter desire. It subtly affects sleep quality, emotional resilience, and even how strongly the immune system responds to stress. The body becomes a little more guarded, a little more isolated at the cellular level. In men over 60, sexual inactivity begins to influence blood flow in a way that is far more structural than most people realize. An erection is not simply a moment of arousal. It is a hydraulic event where arteries open wide and flood delicate tissue with oxygen and nutrients. This repeated expansion and relaxation acts like a natural form of physical therapy for the blood vessels and smooth muscle inside the penis. When that cycle stops, the tissue is no longer being stretched and nourished in the same way, and over time it begins to lose elasticity. The smooth muscle fibers slowly become more rigid, and microscopic amounts of fibrous tissue replace what was once soft and responsive, which makes future erections more difficult even if desire is still present in the mind. The body is not refusing intimacy. It is slowly forgetting how to perform it. This change is closely tied to circulation. As men age, the arteries everywhere in the body already tend to narrow and stiffen due to natural wear, cholesterol buildup, and reduced nitric oxide production. Sexual arousal normally stimulates the release of nitric oxide, a molecule that relaxes blood vessels and improves blood flow. Without regular sexual activity, this pathway becomes less active, and the vessels in the genital region lose some of their ability to dilate. The result is a gradual reduction in the amount of blood that can enter the erectile tissue, which means weaker, shorter, or less reliable erections. This is not sudden, and that is what makes it so deceptive, because the change happens quietly over months and years. In women, the story is different but equally biological. Sexual arousal increases blood flow to the vaginal walls, which keeps the tissue thick, elastic, and well lubricated. When sexual activity declines after 60, that blood flow decreases, and the tissue begins to thin and dry. Estrogen levels are already lower at this stage of life, and without the added stimulation of arousal, the vaginal lining can become fragile and more prone to irritation, burning, or small tears. This is not only about comfort during sex. It can also affect daily activities like walking, sitting, or using the bathroom, because the tissue has lost some of its natural protective softness. These physical changes create a feedback loop. As tissues become less flexible and more sensitive, any attempt at intimacy may feel uncomfortable or awkward, which discourages further sexual activity. The body then receives even less stimulation, accelerating the decline in circulation and tissue health. Over time, the genitals begin to behave like an unused limb, still present, but no longer fully functional, not because they are broken, but because they are underused. What makes this particularly profound is that these tissues are designed to respond to use throughout life. Even in later decades, when desire may be quieter and rhythm slower, the body still benefits from the gentle surge of blood, oxygen, and neural signaling that comes with arousal. Without it, the structures involved in sexual response slowly shrink and stiffen, much like a garden that is no longer watered, still there, but gradually losing its softness and vitality. As sexual activity declines after 60, the endocrine system quietly begins to shift its internal balance, because hormones are not produced in isolation. They are shaped by what the body repeatedly experiences. In men, testosterone is not only a product of the testes, it is also regulated by brain signals that are strengthened through arousal, touch, and sexual engagement. When these signals fade, the hypothalamus and pituitary reduce their stimulation of testosterone production, leading to a gradual drop that goes beyond what aging alone would cause. This decline affects far more than sexual interest. Testosterone plays a central role in maintaining muscle mass, red blood cell production, energy levels, and even cognitive sharpness. So when it falls, the entire body begins to feel slower, weaker, and less resilient. In women, estrogen follows a similar pattern of responsiveness. After menopause, estrogen levels are already lower, But sexual arousal and orgasm can still stimulate small surges of this hormone through neural and vascular pathways. When intimacy disappears, those small but meaningful boosts vanish, and estrogen levels remain consistently low. This contributes to thinning skin, reduced collagen production, and increased bone breakdown, making fractures and joint pain more likely over time. It also influences the brain, because estrogen supports memory, mood regulation, and the health of neurons, so its absence can subtly affect how clearly and brightly the mind functions. These hormonal changes also reach into metabolism. Both testosterone and estrogen help regulate how the body uses sugar and fat. When their levels drop, the body becomes more prone to storing fat, especially around the abdomen, while losing lean muscle. This shift increases insulin resistance, raising the risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. What looks like simple weight gain with age is often a hormonal echo of a quieter, less stimulated body. The skin, too, tells this story. Hormones support blood flow and collagen, which keeps skin thick and elastic. As sexual activity declines and hormone levels fall, the skin becomes thinner, drier, and more fragile, bruising more easily and healing more slowly. Even hair growth can change, because follicles depend on hormonal signals to stay in their active phase. The body's outer appearance reflects the inner endocrine retreat. Perhaps most deeply, these hormonal shifts affect how alive a person feels inside their own body. Testosterone and estrogen both interact with dopamine and serotonin in the brain, shaping motivation, pleasure, and emotional warmth. When these hormones decline, people may notice less drive, less joy in everyday activities, and a subtle emotional flattening. It is not always sadness, but a kind of dimming, as if the colors of life are slightly less vivid. What makes this especially important is that the endocrine system is adaptive. It responds to what the body does, not just to age. Regular sexual activity, even gentle and infrequent, sends a signal that the body is still engaged in connection, pleasure, and reproduction at some level. That signal encourages the brain and glands to maintain hormone production, preserving muscle, bone, energy, and mood. When that signal disappears, the system assumes it is no longer needed and begins to downshift, conserving resources in a way that slowly erodes vitality, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a steady, almost invisible fading of the biological fire that once kept the body strong and responsive. When sexual intimacy fades after 60, the immune system quietly begins to change its behavior, because it is deeply connected to how often the body experiences touch, pleasure, and emotional closeness. One of the most important immune substances influenced by intimacy is immunoglobulin A, an antibody found in saliva, tears, and the lining of the respiratory and digestive tracts. This antibody forms the first shield against viruses and bacteria, preventing them from entering the body in the first place. Sexual activity has been shown to increase levels of this antibody, and when that activity disappears, the shield becomes thinner, leaving older adults more exposed to everyday infections. The reason this happens is rooted in the nervous system. Intimacy reduces stress hormones and increases calming signals from the brain to the immune cells. When stress is low, immune cells communicate efficiently, identifying threats quickly and responding with precision. When sexual activity is absent and cortisol remains slightly elevated, immune cells become confused and less coordinated. They release more inflammatory chemicals but produce fewer of the specific antibodies and killer cells needed to fight real invaders. This creates a body that feels inflamed and tired, yet is paradoxically less protected. This imbalance explains why people who experience long-term loneliness or lack of physical connection often report more frequent colds, slower recovery from illness, and lingering fatigue. The body is expending energy on inflammation instead of on defense and repair. In older adults, whose immune systems are already less robust due to age, this shift can be especially significant. A simple infection that would once have been mild can become more severe or take much longer to resolve. Wound healing is also affected. Immune cells play a central role in repairing damaged tissue, guiding the formation of new blood vessels and collagen. When these cells are under the influence of chronic stress and reduced oxytocin, they do their work more slowly and less accurately. Cuts, bruises, and even internal microinjuries in muscles and joints take longer to heal, increasing the risk of chronic pain and mobility problems. The gut, which contains a large portion of the immune system, is sensitive to these changes as well. Stress hormones alter the balance of bacteria in the intestines, promoting harmful microbes and weakening the intestinal barrier. This allows inflammatory substances to leak into the bloodstream, further burdening the immune system and contributing to fatigue, joint pain, and brain fog. Sexual intimacy, by calming the nervous system and boosting oxytocin, normally helps maintain a healthier gut environment. When it disappears, the gut becomes more vulnerable, and so does the rest of the body. Even the body's ability to detect and destroy abnormal cells, including early cancerous changes, is influenced by immune balance. Chronic inflammation combined with weakened immune surveillance creates a biological environment where harmful cells are more likely to survive and multiply. While this process is slow and silent, it is part of why long-term emotional and physical isolation is associated with higher rates of serious disease. The immune system is not only a defense force, it is also a reflection of how safe and connected the body feels. Sexual intimacy sends a powerful signal of belonging and relaxation, allowing immune cells to shift from a state of alarm to a state of efficient protection. When that signal fades, the body remains slightly guarded, less capable of mounting strong, targeted responses, and more prone to the slow erosion of health that comes from being under constant, low-level stress. The human nervous system is designed to interpret connection as a signal of survival, and sexual intimacy is one of the deepest forms of that signal. After 60, when sexual touch and desire begin to fade, the brain does not simply register the absence of pleasure, it registers a change in meaning. Regions involved in emotional safety, including the limbic system and the insular cortex, become less active when physical closeness is missing. These areas normally help the body feel grounded in itself and in other people. When they are understimulated, the brain shifts toward patterns associated with isolation, even if a person is surrounded by others. This sense of isolation is not only psychological, it alters heart rhythm, breathing patterns, and even digestion. The heart becomes slightly less variable in its beat, which is a sign of reduced emotional flexibility and resilience. Breathing may become shallower, limiting oxygen delivery to tissues. The digestive system can slow or become irregular because the vagus nerve, which links emotional safety to gut function, is less engaged. These are subtle changes, but over time they shape how the body feels from the inside, often manifesting as fatigue, discomfort, or a vague sense of unease. The brain also changes how it processes reward. Sexual intimacy releases dopamine, which teaches the brain that connection and pleasure are worth seeking. When that source of reward disappears, the brain may become less responsive to other forms of enjoyment as well. Food, music, conversation, and even nature may feel less vivid. This blunting of pleasure, sometimes called anhedonia, is common in older adults who experience long-term emotional and physical disconnection, and it is rooted in real changes in neural chemistry. Memory and learning are affected too. Oxytocin and dopamine both support the formation of new neural connections. When they are reduced, the brain becomes less plastic, meaning it adapts more slowly to new experiences. This can contribute to cognitive rigidity, difficulty learning new skills, and a sense that the mind is becoming smaller or less curious. It is not simply aging. It is the absence of stimulation that once kept the brain engaged and growing. There is also a quiet impact on identity. Sexuality, even in later life, is a way the body affirms its own existence. It is a reminder that one is still capable of desire, response, and being desired. When that affirmation disappears, some people experience a subtle erosion of self-worth. They may feel invisible or irrelevant, even if no one has said anything to suggest it. The nervous system interprets the lack of intimate touch as a sign of social and biological abandonment, and it adjusts emotional tone accordingly. Over time, this can influence how a person relates to the world. They may withdraw slightly, speak less, or avoid eye contact, not out of conscious choice, but because their nervous system has learned that connection is no longer expected. This withdrawal further reduces opportunities for positive stimulation, deepening the cycle. Sexual intimacy is not just an act between bodies. It is a dialogue between nervous systems that reinforces belonging, aliveness, and emotional warmth. When that dialogue ends, the body and brain begin to speak a quieter, lonelier language, one that shapes mood, health, and even the way time is experienced, turning days into something flatter and less richly felt than they once were.